This episode is brought to you by the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. Go to aaomc.org and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic.
Then I'm going to go live and then we can continue this discussion.
Outstanding.
All right. Looks like we are now live.
Super exciting, dude. I love that.
So tell me about this email that is self-congratulating to me.
Yes, I thought you'd appreciate it. I saw it today. I got to find out where it was because I sent out a thing commenting on it. So someone had sent an email out. Here it is. Here we go. Who was it from? Sammy L. Haig. I'm sorry. Sammy L. Haig.
El-Haj.
El-Haj. I apologize about that. I've spent enough time with him. You think I would be able to pronounce his name, and it's not a hard name. He is one of the most fantastic people. I'm actually a huge fan. I overlapped with him when we were in India, which I thought was super cool. We were out there for the big meeting out there in India, and I was out there at the same time he was. He is just a really great guy.
For sure.
But he complimented you on the Orthokeratology, the American Academy Google group. Okay, it comes through as an email to me. But he happened to have commented that you're almost to 500 people who are specifically coming to your YouTube channel.
Yeah, we're almost to 500 subscribers on the YouTube channel.
Pretty crazy,
it's
dude.
Amazing.
That's a humongous amount of people for a specialty thing. I mean, if you think about the amount of fitters that are out there, 500 is a really big portion of them, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, how many total fitters do you think there are out there?
I don't know.
Like
That's
people doing Ortho-K, seriously Ortho-K, or just interested in Ortho-K?
I don't know. That's a really great question. I think it's probably more than it was 10 or 15 years ago, certainly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. 500 has got to be a pretty big portion. I mean, I would imagine.
I mean, one can hope, right?
Well, how many would you estimate?
I don't know. These things are always difficult to gauge, but there's so many. I mean, I keep hearing year in and year out, this is about to blow up. This is about to blow up. Next year at Vision by Design, you're going to have thousands of people, and we keep doing better, pandemic notwithstanding, we keep doing better each Vision by Design, but it's not blown up like that. So, either people aren't interested, they're not ready, or whatever the case may be. I don't know.
I still think it's great. But I think 500 subscribers is a lot of people. But what's great for me was that the video that was used on the email was building future doctors. So that, of course, made me super happy. So, you get your kicks where you can.
It was a good episode.
And I've been promoting that all over. I love when you were doing that. And I listened to it. I was driving down to Missouri to do some outdoor activities with my father. And my father is 79 years old, and he's just he's a beast. I'm like, I'm going to work till 7 and we're going to drive 14 and a half hours straight down to Missouri so I can go hunting the next day. And my dad's like, I'll do that. So we're driving in the car at like 3 a.m. somewhere coming through like Illinois or Iowa or Missouri or someplace. And we decided to listen to this Building Future Doctors podcast, right? Because my dad hadn't heard it, obviously.
Yeah.
So I said, well, let's listen to it. And I enjoyed how you were like, we like to talk about Ortho-K, but sometimes we do stuff that is adjacent, and this is adjacent to adjacent. I just got a real kick out of that. So, I'm normally real sensitive about listening to myself after I do a thing because like, I don't even enjoy my own voice on an answering machine. Right. But I was surprised how well that turned out. So I was pretty pleased. Like I said, if nothing else happens from that, if one person goes out and gets a student who works in their office and maybe becomes an eye doctor, I mean, how amazing would that be?
Yeah. And I'm surprised this isn't done more in our industry because it's done in a lot of other ones. I know I have friends that are graphic designers, and the firms they work for use a co-op system where they bring in somebody at a high school or college level to like, show off what they can do some, some grunt work, basically design wise, but it's a pool of people they actively pull from. So I'm surprised it's not used more. I'm glad we did the episode.
Yeah, I was excited about it. I got a kick out of that. And I was excited about you almost getting to 500 subscribers. So
we'll get there.
I might, just like I might ask my wife or like a staff member to subscribe just to get you over the hump. So when you get to 499, reach out to me and I'll be your 500. How does that sound?
All right. That makes sense. I love it.
I'm trying to get to 500 reviews at my office, and I would never cheat on that. They have to be actual reviews. They have to be people doing it. But it takes so long. Getting reviews is very similar to getting subscribers. We're at 275 or 280 or something like that reviews. It's just so hard to make that leap, to get enough people to want to be feedback about, your performance. We could have a whole podcast just on reviews.
Yeah, we could.
And how to get them and how to avoid bad ones and what to say when you get a bad review.
Yeah.
Totally. I could go off on that subject alone because I just read a Facebook post from somebody who had a bad review and they like got lippy with the person, and it was like, wow, that's like the worst thing you want to do. You're never going to win. You're never going to win an internet battle, right? I think there's something along those lines.
Yeah.
You're always going to get trolled and flamed and all that kind of craziness.
My dentist was trying to recruit new patients and positive reviews. And what they ended up doing was partially what turned me off. I talked about this with Nick Despeditis once on an episode of the Corrected View, but they offered me a car. Like they offered to enter me in a sweepstakes to get a car through the dental practice if I brought in X number of patients and left X number of good reviews or something like that. And I was like, this is disgusting.
That seems really sketchy to me.
Yeah.
No, yeah. It has to be organic. I think people can read that and sense that. You have to have people who really legitimately want to say good things about you.
For sure.
You can't have one person leaving 14 reviews. That just doesn't make any sense at all. Although a car would be a pretty nice thing to win. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
but with my luck, it would be like, all right, you're going to win my son's 2003 Ion with 130,000 miles. Yeah,
that's right.
You'd be like, okay, all right.
It's yours now, buddy.
Super. That's pretty awesome. Congratulations. Yeah, you owe me on the insurance. Like a bill with it, It's got a bunch of repairs that need to be done. We thought we'd leave it for you.
Right. Yeah. That's hilarious.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, or I wanted to talk about, was when I do my presentation at Vision by Design, I have the privilege of doing the boot camp presentation for presenting or for fitting Ortho-K lenses. I do section 1 and 2. And I talk about fit sets, and then I talk about empirical fitting, and then I talk about designing Ortho-K lenses. And I just want to expound a little bit on that today for people out there who are interested in getting into Ortho-K, or maybe they're just dabbling their toes, or maybe they want to commit to doing more, but they're afraid to. And I also, as part of that, want to talk about my arc, So, you know how movies have arcs, right? Like a long series, the Marvel movies, someone does this and then they end up like that. So I want to talk about kind of where I have gone over time. And I think that journey is kind of interesting as well.
Sounds good.
To talk a little bit about that, when I give that lecture during boot camp, I always tell people you've got really basically 3 options. You've got the fit set option, and I'm going to talk a lot about that in just a few moments. You've got the empirical option, which is what I call phone a friend. And then you have designing your own Ortho-K retainers. I like to call them retainers, but lenses, which is its own sort of thing. And we're going to be concentrating a lot of our talk in that direction today. But I think it's kind of fun to talk about where I came from and where a lot of people come from, and then where they could go, and then what the potentiality for all that is. So when I started doing Ortho-K 18 years ago, I guess, one of the first things that I did was I was kind of dabbling in it a little bit. And I've told this story a number of times, but I was actually going up an elevator with your dad, Kerry Herzberg. I think we were in Toronto, maybe, or one of the places. And I just started dabbling with Ortho-K. And I was asking him, how do I get into it? What do I do? And your dad was kind of blunt, because at times that he has been pretty blunt with me. And he just said, look, get a couple fit sets and start fitting people. And I was like, what? And he's like, oh yeah, just go out and get a couple fit sets and just start putting Ortho-K lenses on people.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, who should I call? Should I call this? Should I call that? He's like, look, I don't mean, he didn't say, don't mean to be rude. He's like, just get a fit set.
Yeah.
Here's a couple of places to get them and just start fitting people. And I was like, all right. So I literally came home from that meeting, and I bought a couple fit sets. That nowadays they give them away, I think, most of the time, or they don't charge terribly much for them. But at that time, it was a fair investiture. I had to put out some bucks I didn't have because, I didn't have a whole lot of money at the time. But your dad was pretty adamant. And I did that. I bought like a context fit set right out of the chute. And I bought a context one. I bought some other stuff, might have been an Ortho Tools set. I can't remember at this time. But I bought like 2 or 3 fit sets, right? And I just started fitting. And it was crazy because I would have a patient come in, and if their cornea at all looked like I could fit it, I would put Ortho-K lenses on that patient, right? They'd be like -2, their keratometry readings or their topography readings are approximately this. I was like, I'm gonna fit them. At that time, I wasn't thinking eccentricity. I wasn't thinking elevation maps. I wasn't thinking any of that stuff, right? So I just, man, if a cornea came by and they weren't actively running from me, I put an Ortho-K lens on them, right?
Yeah.
Like if they even like, I'm like, are you nearsighted? Yeah, bam, boom, here's an Ortho-K lens on your eye. And, I made some mistakes doing that. I fit toric corneas with a spherical lens, and that's not a really great idea because you have to have that toric alignment curve to really make that perfect. But I'm telling you, I had great results. I had patients who were happy, who saw well. Nowadays I would look at that fit and cringe and be like, oh, wow, it's, displaced a little bit, or, maybe it wasn't a complete treatment zone.
Right.
But man, I fit them. And it was like the Wild West in my office, and my results, though, were good. I mean, I was, even with just a basic fit set, with just basic spherical Ortho-K lenses, I was hitting 80, 85% success, upwards of 90% on my patients. And I was doing it with just basic technology, right? I was doing it with a black box design. I really, didn't have any idea what it was doing. I knew what it was doing, but I didn't know all the curves and the alignment curve and the connection between the reverse zone and that curve and the sag and all that stuff was, I was just kind of Wild Westing it, but it worked. And that's the crazy thing. Because when you look at a lot of the stuff we do fitting wise now and all the high tech things we do and all the amazing things we do, really a good place to start is just getting Ortho-K lenses onto people and seeing how it goes. It was a great way to learn. So that's kind of where I got my start. And oftentimes when I go to conventions, Vision by Design being, in my opinion, simply the best of the best. We should move it to the spring, but that's a discussion unto itself. By the way, you're truly messing up my fall schedule.
I apologize.
I'm just going to rant.
It's not
for a
me.
moment.
It was something called COVID-19. I don't know if you've heard of it. It just kind of like, took us all by surprise. I mean, some of us more than others, depending on where you lived in the world. But those are the dates we could get. So that's what we got to do.
Man, you messed up my fall vacation. It's a whole thing up in this joint. I was just looking at VRBOs trying to figure out, and my dates are wrong. It's a thing. So I'm carrying a grudge, but I'm going to try to get past it. I'm going to try and do the best I can. But when I'm at conventions, when I'm at, Vision by Design or any of the other major contact lens conventions, I always run across people who are like, oh, I saw you on stage. I like what you had to say. What do I do? And I say the same thing that your dad said. And that is, get a fit set and just start slapping stuff on people,
Yeah.
see how it goes, look at it, learn. Too tight, too loose. That's what that's what a spherical ortho-K lens looks like on a toric cornea. Don't do that,
Yeah.
don't, if nothing else, it taught me what not to do.
Do you start with like family members? Is that a safe bet, or staff, or
Staff is always good. Family members are good. I started out whole hog with the whole thing. So for me, it was, anytime I thought I could talk somebody into trying it, we did it, that kind of a deal. But I still think it's a good way to go. I still think it's not a bad way to start. Now, maybe you're not going to stay there, but I just had a patient in the chair this afternoon, young Asian man, and I've been having great difficulties getting the fit as good as I wanted to on this 12-year-old's eye, right? Just could not seem to get him where he needed to get. And I had gotten frustrated. I'd been ordering through a lab. This is what I want. They weren't quite giving me what they wanted. And my labs are fantastic. I wouldn't change my labs for anything. I mean, I work with 4 or 5 different labs. I do quite a bit of business through each and every one of those. So if you were to look at the amount of ortho-K product I order in a given month, if you looked at an individual lab, it only might be $1,000 worth of lenses from a given lab. But sometimes I'm working with 3 or 4 labs, depending on who I'm working with and what I'm doing. So I wouldn't change anything about my labs, but I just couldn't get this kid's eye on lockdown. It just wasn't happening, right? Right eye was perfect 2020, 2015. Left eye was like 2030, 2040 with not good centration. And I was just getting frustrated. I'd ordered a product from a lab. It came in. It just wasn't doing what I thought I had ordered or the parameters I had asked for. So I went to my Context fit set in my office, and I just trial fit him, real quick and dirty trial fit in my office in a 15-minute period. And kid comes back today, 2 weeks later, and he's 2025 plus, so flirt with 2020. And now I'm going to have to do some small tweaking with that particular ortho-K lens for him. But man, it just short-circuited all that extra effort and all that order and wait, and it comes in. So sometimes just having those fit sets in the office can be great, just as an emergency thing, is fixing a problem you didn't know you had, or you're struggling, or timeline. Right. I have patients who drive in from long distances, 2.5, 3 hours. I got people that come from Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It's like a 5-hour ride.
Wow.
They're in town for one night only. I got to fit them in the night they're here.
No pressure.
Right? And then they're going to stay in a hotel. And then the next morning, they have to be doing well enough for me to feel like I can send them home and maybe see their local eye doctor up north. So, if I order a product in and it's not right, that's a problem. But if I can fit them out of that fit set and be 95% perfect the next day and feel good about it,
right?
I mean, that's like magic for me, logistically anyways. I think it'd be different if you're working somewhere where the logistics weren't as much of an issue. But since we have that bizarrely wide draw area, it's really been pretty great.
Right.
So anyways, obviously I'm a fit set guy, and I still recommend people should at least try that, because it's just a great way to get started, And there's so many companies that make stuff, there's the IC Ortho-K lens, there's Contacts, which I already mentioned, there's the Dr. Tongue design stuff, there's there's just Paragon has a fantastic CRT fit set you can lay your hands on. So that stuff's magic. And then from there, on my personal journey, I started doing the empirical stuff, right? So where you pick up the phone and you're like, here's what I've got for a SIM-K, here's what I've got for a prescription, and it could have been Euclid, or it could have been, an IC Ortho-K lens, and all these different Dr. Tongue's designs and all this different stuff. And then I decided and I had good success with the empirical stuff, but in order to really learn, I think a lot of practitioners turn to designing their own ortho-K lenses. So the question then becomes, when does one make that jump from fitting out of a fit set with a black box design where you don't know what's in there, right, to ordering empirical, where again, you don't know what you're ordering, someone else is doing the work for you, right? And there are some fantastic designs out there. And we'll talk about that at the end today. And we'll talk a little bit about ordering empirical, but also giving them more information, right? So we'll talk about that. But then I think it's interesting to know, or to see that leap, right? When people start designing their own ortho-K lenses, right? And I was thinking about this last night. So there's a bunch of systems out there for doing that. Wave, I've worked with Wave. Wave does some amazing stuff. Ortho Tools, I used to do some Ortho Tool stuff. Not as much now as I did at one time, but Ortho Tools has some pretty great stuff. iSpace has got some pretty great stuff with their Forge design and their different topographical stuff that they can do for you. And then RGP Designer as well. And then someone just told me that Medmont might be doing some of this as well, where you're designing your own lens based on the topography, right?
Yeah.
I haven't kept up with Medmont, but those guys are crazy, and I feel like they're always coming up with something new over there. So, Randy Kojima, an amazing guy. That whole team over there is pretty fantastic.
For sure.
Interestingly enough, and I'm sure you've talked to Randy Kojima on 100 occasions, there is no one you want to follow less than Randy Kojima. That is like, I don't know if I told this story to you or not before, but that's like the
You mean
slot.
speaking wise, like lecturing?
Oh, yeah, you don't want to go on stage after Randy Kojima.
Yeah.
When you go on after Randy, I went on in Vegas for one of the big contact lens conventions, and I was going on stage as he was finishing, right? So I'd say, I don't know if I told this story, but I'm gonna tell it again anyways. I'm sitting in the room waiting for him to finish, standing room only. So all the seats are filled and there's all these doctors in the back, right? So now I'm getting ready to go on stage and the room empties out. Like it went from being like 200 people in this room to like 75 people, right? Like 60 or 70% leave. And it was just harsh. It was like the worst ever. But he's so entertaining and he's so knowledgeable on topography. You just, you can't argue with that guy.
For sure.
So I think the question becomes, when does a practitioner, and I'm sure there are practitioners hopefully who will listen to this, who have done fit sets, who've done empirical, right? Done the phone a friend thing. When do they make that leap to Wave or Ortho Tools or RGP Designer or iSpace?
Right.
And I think that is a really interesting question. It's a question because how do you as a practitioner recognize when you need to make that leap from a noob fitter or a beginning fitter to someone who's making the decisions on how I want to tweak that alignment curve, or do I want a toric periphery, or how am I going to change the sag to address a particular issue? I find that interesting, and I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. I feel like it's when a practitioner maybe. Do you hear noises in the background in my office? No. Okay, we're just going to ignore it then. As long as it's not showing up on the mic, it's going to work fine for us.
We're all good.
We're all good. I think that a practitioner is going to want to make a jump from doing basic fitting when they're bored enough with the normal cases to start taking on ones that are more complicated and they want to have a larger fit in it, or a larger role in the fitting of the patient. So I have been blessed with sitting on the fellowship committee with Caroline Kauke and company for some time now. And inevitably, the best candidates we have are the candidates who come for fellowship, who are fitting Wave, who are fitting Ortho Tools, who are fitting, the iSpace and the Forge design or the RGP Designer. Because I think those people have a much better feel for how I'm going to make the alignment curve meet the eccentricity, meet the elevation maps, meet my power maps, kind of, how that all comes together. So I find that really, I find that when we're doing fellowship testing, it is almost inevitably with people who are doing the designing of the lenses themselves. So, which brings me to kind of a little bit of more of a discussion too, about my sort of my arc, right? We talked about my arc earlier. So I started out as a fit set guy, right?
Right.
And then I started ordering empirical stuff. And then I started doing the design portion component of it, right? So, you know, trying to do wave design and trying to do some of these designs. And I have colleagues like, you know, Tom Wachewski or Maller, people who are incredibly talented with wave. And there's guys like Dwight, and all of a sudden I'm forgetting his last name. He's part of the Ortho-K Academy board.
Oh, Dwight
Barnes.
Yeah. He's
Dwight
on the
Barnes.
advisory committee. Yeah.
Yes. I believe he's a big Ortho Tools guy, right?
Okay.
So you have these incredibly talented guys who are so good at that. And I myself have done it, but I wasn't wowed with the time investiture.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting for me is, you know, I started out with fit sets, then I went empirical, then I did my own designing. And now I'm leaning towards empirical again.
Interesting.
Which
Why
I
is that?
find really interesting because I just don't want to take the time at the end of a long day to spend an hour or 45 minutes or even 30 minutes designing an Ortho-K lens.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
now I'm more apt to, here's my topography, here's my refraction, and send it to somebody to make it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Which I just think that evolution for me has been interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever got good enough at wave. I don't think I ever got good enough at the designing end of it to be exceptional. You know, to be one of those guys who can design a Ortho-K lens in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like a Dwight Barnes or a Wachewski or a Maller or somebody, or even, you know, a Rob Garrett, someone who's really like totally into the design parts of it. But I think it's important for practitioners out there who haven't explored designing their own Ortho-K lenses, that they should do that as part of their advancement or part of their evolution.
Yeah.
But I personally I'm not doing as much of it as I once did.
It's interesting. I mean, would you do custom for specific cases? And then, you know, like, are you able to like say, well, X amount of patients will be one way and X amount of patients will be empirical?
Yeah, I think you almost have to. You have to be able to look at it and say, okay, this has got a normal cornea, a normal prescription. You know, I look at the elevation maps, they look pretty straightforward. I know that's going to go in this slot, right? I know that I can get assistance from like a Mark Cosgrove or a Steve Ernst or, you know, someone over at Euclid to whip up a toric for me because their toric I like their toric design for certain parameters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know I'm going to have something that I'm going to want some help on because I know Steve Ernst can do it in 15 minutes, or I'm going to take 2 hours to grind it out because it's a super complicated one. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think practitioners have to kind of develop their own feel for where a patient falls into their slots, if you will, you know?
For sure.
So I guess that one of the things I wanted to talk about today was just kind of expounding a little bit on, you know, fit sets are a great place to start. Empirical is fantastic for most people. I think ultimately fitters, if they want to make that leap to fellowship, I think they have to have that design ability or experience in their background. But I'm unsure if that's necessarily the best for every case or it's necessary for every case.
Yeah.
You know, one of the podcasts that I saw that you were coming out with was a podcast about equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You guys have either done that or have been talking about that.
Right.
One of the best things that I've done in my office is I broke down and bought a video slit lamp, a good one. Man, that is magic for me.
Well, how so?
I'll do a fit, and I do the fluorescein I do the fluorescein videos of it, and I can record those and I drop them onto my Google Drive. My Google Drive is enormous. I had to go out and buy extra space for it because I've got so much dumped into my Google Drive, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can take those videos and upload them into a file on my Google Drive. And then when I am needing to design something, or if I'm needing to consult with someone to get a design that I want made for me, I'll take my topography, I'll take my refraction, and I'll take my initial fitting, the videos of them, and I just send a link right to whoever I'm working with. And that way they can go and look at the videos. And man, that has been like magic for me. That has been
For
money.
sure.
And it saved me a heartache because it used to be that I would look at something. Let's say I designed something, right? I designed a wave lens, let's say, and I'm putting it on somebody's eye. Or, I designed an eye space lens and I'm putting it on somebody's eye. I used to just write notes, looks a little tight at the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position, or it's dropping with the blink. Man, I don't even take notes now. I just videos on file. And then I can go and watch those videos later on. And I see things I didn't see when I was in the exam room, It takes away that gut feeling of what I thought I saw and what I actually saw. So I can go in there and look at it.
Right.
And, I think of all the equipment I own, or I shouldn't say own because I own a lot of stuff, but of all the equipment I bought in the last 2 years, that's probably saved me the most money.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question then when it comes to equipment. This is coming out of the chat too, is like, what topographer do you recommend for doing custom design? Looks like this doctor also does a lot of scleral lenses as well.
So that's
What's
tricky.
Your go-to?
So that's tricky. So here's the story with that. If you're a scleral guy, you want Oculus.
Okay.
Because Oculus does a really good job getting outside of the cornea, right? So Oculus is the bee's knees for scleral fitting. Now, I don't own an Oculus, but I know a lot of guys who have Oculuses, and I say guys in the generic term.
Yes.
That could be men or women, right? Okay, just like dudes as male or female. So the Oculus gets out in the periphery better than the Medmont does. But I'm a Medmont guy. That's what I use, 99% of the time. Okay. And a lot of the software that's out there, Ortho Tools, Wave, a lot of those different softwares were originally developed with the Medmont in mind. Okay. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were dovetailed with that Medmont when they were created. Now, I believe Wave works really well with Oculus as well, but I know a lot of them were originally designed either on the Medmont topography as the base or with the Medmont topographer as part of the design process. So if you're asking me what I use, I'm a Medmont guy and I have been for close to 20 years now.
Yeah.
But that's just the way I felt. And their software has been really good for me, and their topography has paid me a lot of dividends. I have friends who do the Oculus and like it, but for me, it would be like fitting with oven mitts on right now, because I'd have to kind of go back and relearn. So if you fit a lot of sclerals, you may want to lean Oculus.
I've been hearing a lot about the Pentacam. I think we did a podcast with Ken Mahler about using the Pentacam for Ortho-K.
Okay. Has he been happy with it?
There's a whole episode where he talks about how he started messing around with it and got more into it. And, it was really excited about using it. And as we're trying to finalize the program for Vision by Design, we've been thinking about, should Pentacam be more of the conversation when it comes to boot camp?
Well, I think that's interesting, because I don't have any experience with the Pentacam. It really hasn't even been on my radar, because traditionally that's not, we think of Medmont, we think of Oculus. Pentacam has not been one that's ever been, on my radar. Maybe the Pentacam people need to reach out to me and talk to me, because I'm not familiar with their stuff. Maybe someone needs to call me, because, I'd be interested. I'd be interested in learning about it. Is there a podcast with Mahler talking about that?
Yeah. It's one of our early ones. It's like episode 3, I think. I'll send you the link to it. It's when we were doing audio.
Send me the
only.
link, because that way I don't have to send myself an email.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. As we're talking, I'll actually put it in chat too, in the Facebook live chat. But it's an audio only version before we started doing video. But it was really fascinating to. I hate to use the term mad scientist, but Ken Mahler is kind of like that. He's got this great mind and proficiency.
It's a sharp dude.
Yeah. And it's the way he just when you hear his story about how he got into Wave and how he started custom designing lenses and how he just stuck with it and made it work for him. It's really inspiring stuff. And so I'll put a link to that in the chat and then in the show notes for this episode for sure.
I find those crazy fitters like Mahler, or we talked about Wachowski earlier, or Steve Ernst. Steve Ernst has done. He can do stuff that just I'm like, what? I stand next to him. I'm like, what? Mark Cosgrove, same thing. I mean, some of these people
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's, 100 others out there like that. But some of these people are so evolved, for lack of a better term, with the things that they're doing, that I just find it like, wow, like crazy
Yeah.
how good they are at it. Because when I try to do some of the things or emulate some of the things they're doing, I'm just, I'm lost. I get
Right.
it, but wow, I don't get it like they get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to go back. I'd be really interested to go back and listen to that podcast, especially if it's audio only, because it'd be easy to listen to in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Just slap it on and roll. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, there's always an audio only version of our podcast that you can get through Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and then there's the YouTube link, which I think I'm going to just put in the chat real quick here. Oculus,
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, the Oculus
that.
Pentacam for Ortho-K, episode 5. It's fantastic. I really felt like we could have done like another. I might have him back because I feel like we could do a whole nother episode on like on what's happened since then. So
Yeah, the Pentacam, that is a big player, out there in dry eye, right? Yeah, the Pentacam's a big player out there in dry eye. So I know Wachowski's been doing some designing from the Pentacam for his wave lenses. So that's what threw me earlier when you said Pentacam. For some reason, in my mind, I call Pentacam Oculus, and so I don't even think about it as Pentacam. So that's why I was like Pentacam, and that's because I think of it as, I just say it as Oculus because that's what I think of it as strange as that is. I don't own it, so that's why I don't think about it. I almost bought one, but I for whatever reason I ended up staying with the MedMod. But the Oculus, especially with Wave now, because aren't they partnered with Wave, or they own Wave? Maybe that's how it goes. It's
they've come together. It's a whole thing. I'm sure we'll learn more about it in the coming months, and then at Vision by Design. So
yeah. But I'm pretty sure that's part of why that works so well with Wave. I don't doubt that at all.
This podcast is made possible by the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. If you want to learn how to do Ortho-K, then we can teach you. If you're looking for a passionate community of like-minded experts, then consider becoming an AAOMC member. Or if myopia management just isn't your thing, that's okay too. Use the AAOMC online doctor search tool to refer your myopia management patients. For more information, visit AAOMC.org and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic.
yeah, I also think to kind of go back a little bit, I think it's very interesting to say that you have done less custom fitting and more of the other kind, especially since I feel like a lot of docs now in the AAOMC are looking at custom as the future. Like that's it. Like designing your own lenses. I'm not saying I'm not doing
custom. I'm just not designing them myself.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, laziness has become a factor for me, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
We prefer to think of it as efficiency instead of laziness.
Well, if I start let's say I start at 8:30 in the morning and I'm finishing at 7 or 7:30 at night. It's hard for me to say I'm going to sit down and spend an hour designing a Ortho-K lens for a patient when I can take the topography and the refraction and send it to a person I trust and have them hammer it out in 15 minutes for me. Right? Yeah. So I guess that's probably that's closer to the truth. Okay. For me anyways, it's not that I can't do it. It's not that I haven't done it. It's just, I tend to want to outsource that. I'm certainly not saying I'm not doing custom stuff because, I can recognize elevation. I can look at toricity. I can say this is going to be X, Y, Z. And so for me, it becomes a matter of, having it manufactured for me rather than sitting down and making it myself. I guess is what it boils down to.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the few practitioners who admit I'm a little lazy.
Well, I mean, it's very involved. It's long hours, and at some point you got to have a life, right? Like I don't hold it against you for sure. It's I don't know. It's all magic to me. So
I like that. I like that a lot.
yeah. I
So
mean, every
anyways,
time go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to talk about, the different modalities, the different options. I think it's important too for fitters to establish a relationship with a lab or labs. I mean, having people you can trust, knowing something that's going to get done right. I mean, I think that's a big part of Ortho-K,
Yeah.
knowing that when I send out to GP specialist, or I send out to Context, or I send out to Euclid, or if I'm going to design one on Wave, or if I'm going to design one on iSpace or Ortho Tools, I want to know the lab's going to do it right for me, and I want to have trust in those labs.
Right. So how do
I
you
want to
figure out what lab is best for you? Because I get asked all the time, which lab or which design should I work with? And as the AOMC, like, we're a neutral entity. We're in everybody's corner. We want to work with everybody. We don't want to favor anyone over the other. And obviously, no one lens works on all patients. So, but apparently, that's a very frustrating response to get. So
I've gotten spoiled, and I think it's easy to forget that part of what's allowed me to become spoiled is that I've been in the field so long.
Mm-hmm.
So, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you could pick up a phone and call the head of the lab and be like, hey, I want to fit your product. And they'd spend a half an hour on the phone with you discussing the ins and outs of what they're doing. You know what I mean? So I'm a little spoiled, but I think a big part of that, like if you're looking for a lab, if you're looking for a contact, you reach out to someone who's a fitter. I have made warm handshakes for probably 4 or 5, maybe not 400 or 500. I bet I've made warm handshakes for at least 150 to 200 doctors, where people will reach out to me and they're like, I want to fit this. What do you think? And I'll say, well, here's a warm handshake with the owner of this lab, or here's the guy at iSpace, or here's the guy at Context, or here's the guy at GP Specialist, or here's the person at Euclid I work with.
Right.
Sometimes reaching out to someone who's already doing it, and I invite people, send me an email. If you're interested in fitting and you want a warm handshake, sometimes I'll make a connection to 2 or 3 labs for the same person, check, here's a person to email. And most of the time, even the really busy labs, they're willing to take an email and make a connection. I had a doctor from out west who had been unhappy with his lab. They weren't taking good care of him. They weren't, there was some connection that wasn't being made, or they wouldn't make him a product he wanted. So I connected him with another lab that'll remain nameless. And I mean, they were over the moon because this guy was making $2,000 or $3,000 worth of Ortho-K and scleral lenses a month. And what lab doesn't want all that business, right?
Right.
And it was just he couldn't get a word in edgewise. And if you reach out to someone who's already a fitter who maybe has those established relationships, I was able to get him to the person in charge of the lab, and boom, they're off and running, and everybody's happy. Now he's getting his products made. He had a bunch of custom designs from some software that he had either developed or had been working with that no one else could do. And this lab was more than happy to make all of his exotic stuff. And, the lab's making $2 or $3 grand a month off this guy, and he's happy because his people are fit. So it's a win for everybody.
For sure.
And I think it's just a matter of reaching out. And I've talked about this before, and I know I'm overly enthusiastic, and I'm kind of a gushy, excited individual. It's kind of who I am. But nobody in the entirety of healthcare is as excited about Ortho-K and about myopia control is these people. This group of people are so excited to share our specialty that you could reach out to any of the players out there, anyone doing a podcast, anyone who comes on your podcast. You can reach out to Nick Despeditas and he'll email you back. You can reach out to me or Dwight Barnes or really any of the people, and they're going to get back to you. They're going to want to share because they're still excited about it.
For sure. Yeah, and there's a whole group of you in the AAOMC.
honestly, any of those people are going to be stoked, right? They all want to share their story.
I mean, that's why we exist. Is it's a culture of communication. It's colleague, not competition. So, we have a a Google group for members where they can come in and just start asking questions. I don't know why people don't ask more questions. Like, this really bothers me, because I'm the kind of person where it's, and maybe this speaks to my character, I don't know, but like, I have no pride. I don't care how stupid I look. If you have a piece of information that I need, I'm going to ask for it, because I think you end up making yourself look more stupid if you just proceed without getting the information that you need. So if you have what I want, I'm going to ask you for it. So I don't know why people don't ask more questions. Personally.
I think it's because as a doctor, you're supposed to be this font of information.
Mm-hmm.
And when you show that you don't know the information, a lot of doctors get really sensitive about that.
Okay.
I'm kind of like you are. I'm willing to admit when I don't know something, or when I'm, maybe not as good at something as I'd like to be. But a lot of doctors don't feel comfortable admitting. I guess I'm saying doctors, but I could really be talking about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people can't admit when they don't feel comfortable, and I think that's a big hindrance, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that the Academy does well, and I think that extends to all the vision designs I've ever been to.
Mm-hmm.
You can be at a vision design meeting, and someone walks up to you and they're like, "What are you doing for XYZ?" And
Mm-hmm.
boom, we're off to the races. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm super excited. Here's a new thing,
Yeah.
Have you tried this? Have you tried that? I like the DMV Classic. I don't like it. I like a hole in the plunger. I don't. It's not clean. Let's do this. Let's use our fingers. Let's do that. It's that's one of the things that Vision by Design is so amazingly good at, and this community is good at, is being down to earth. I mean, we talked earlier about my veneration for Randy Kojima and how amazing he's on stage. But you run into that guy somewhere, anywhere, and you can talk to him, and he'll tell you all you ever wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
If you get him rolling on stuff, he's going to talk your arm off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like any of the guys and gals in this profession, in this particular specialty.
Yeah.
They're just excited. They're happy to be here.
Yeah. And I often wonder, like, what is it going to take to get to that level of excitement for more? It's like you were talking about Carrie earlier. I mean, we're talking about a guy who taught himself how to drive stick shift because he needed a new car, and the salesman was like, "You should drive stick," and he's like, "I don't know how," and he's like, "You'll pick it up." So he did. He bought the car and then learned how to drive it on the way to meet my mom. And and I think there was heavy traffic, and he got stuck in it, and he just like figured it out as he went. And I think maybe that's a generational thing. I don't know, but it just seems like, more and more people are looking at this situation, and there's a dabble mentality, which I can totally understand. And then there's your origin story and other doctors' origin stories where it's like, just start doing it. Just start doing it, So I don't know what it's going to take. What do you think?
Again, I think ultimately you're going to have a group of people who want to do more, be more, and explore more, and you're going to have some folks who just aren't. And I think the tent is big enough for all of us to be in it. But I think the key is to capture the people who are enthusiastic and excited about it, and have them continue to share their stories so that they get other people enthusiastic and excited about it. I think that's the big take-home message. How many times have you been at a lecture where the doctor wasn't really into it, or they didn't have good communication skills, and then you weren't into it? And I know you've sat, I'm sure, through tons of lectures, right? And you can tell when someone's mailing it in, and you can tell when someone is enthusiastic about it.
Right.
So I think it boils down to putting the enthusiastic people on stage and putting the enthusiastic people in places where they can share their enthusiasm. I think that's what it boils down to. And that's one thing that Vision by Design does well. I missed it this year. I legitimately missed it in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
a huge blow.
Yeah, it was a big deal. And I'm excited that we're going to have it again next year, because it's high time.
Yeah, even though it's in fall. And
oh my gosh, dude, it's right in the middle. It's like in the worst week possible. You could have put it the first week in November, but you just
Well, see, the other thing too is about the spring is that became like this hotbed of meetings. Like I remember because we were originally in the fall for Vision by Design back when it was called Reshaping the World, and we had to switch to April, and we were fine in that area. There was little to no competition, and then all of a sudden, it's like everybody else came rushing into that space. And it was like, we were just stepping on each other's toes, and, I don't know, we'll see what happens with fall, but, because of the pandemic, it was like, we had to reschedule and work with the venue. Because when COVID hit, like, I was hearing stuff from people internationally that were like, you're gonna have to cancel this meeting. And I'm like, you think so? Like, yeah, you're gonna have to cancel. This is gonna be way bigger than anybody realizes over there.
And it hit in Bellevue. Like, it landed there.
Yeah. Right where
you were like at ground zero.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. My wife and I have been coming back from the big contact lens meeting, GSLS. When we came back from GSLS, which was in late January of that year, my wife and I were in the lounge area waiting for a plane, and there were people coughing, and my wife and I were like, right? And that was in January, and we came back, and we had we're big nerds, so we got together and we were doing a board gaming weekend with our college friends, right? So we'd rented a hotel suite, and one of my friends works as management at the hotel. So we had like the total suite thing, and they brought in food and drinks. There's like 6 of us plus our kids, and we're having adult beverages and playing board games and just totally getting our nerd on.
That's awesome.
And this is in like late February. And I told my friends, I'm like, this may be the last time we get together. And they're like, nah, don't worry about it. I'm like, no, seriously. My wife and I, Mary and I, are going to go and we're going to buy toilet paper and a bunch of groceries. And they were like, whatever, don't worry about it. And I was like, no, seriously, you should buy groceries and toilet paper. And then within 3 weeks, like, everything was just, a hot mess. So, I know right where you're coming from with the whole, you knew it was coming, but it was terrible. And I really thought that meeting was going to go. And my wife told me I couldn't go. And I said, I'm not really good at being told no. So I'm like, I'm going. And then, it turned out you guys had to cancel it, but it was just a bad turn of events. So.
Yeah, we had to convince.
Was that stressful, by the way?
Yeah, we had to convince the venue of what was happening, because they're like, well, according to our data for room blocks, like, you guys are doing really well. And I was like, no. At this point, we would be sold out of our room blocks and looking for overflow properties. And they were like, oh, okay. And that's when they started to listen to us. And eventually everything, we were all on the same page, but it was like, I was like, crap, because like, we hadn't been prepared for it in a way of like, are we going to lose our shirt? You know what I mean? Like, are we going to get screwed over? And I mean, we took huge financial losses regardless. We're still recovering from that, but it could have been way worse. Looks like we have another question from the chat. If you're ready for one, we've got 4 viewers.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question: should we always design our own lenses or use the standard lenses supplied by the labs with more than 90% first fit success?
Yeah. So I think a lot of that's going to be on your topographical analysis. So what it boils down to for me is, when I have a patient comes in who wants to do ortho-K, my first thought is always prescription and topography, right? So I'm going to take a look at that topography, and I'm going to say to myself, does that topography look pretty much spherical? Or if it looks spherical, does that match the prescription? And then I say to myself, if I'm dealing with astigmatism, is that the astigmatism being reflected in the topography? And then the next thing that I do is I start looking at elevation. How much difference is there in elevation? Is there a 30 micron, 40 micron, 50 micron, 60 micron different in the high and low points on that landing zone, on that area in the periphery where I'm going to be landing? If it looks like the prescription is matching the topography and the elevation seems like it's not too crazy, then I might be able to do it with a empirical ordered ortho-K lens, right? And I mean, you can do some pretty good stuff just with a context, an IC ortho-K, a Euclid, without necessarily having to go to design your own product, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm saying you can do a pretty decent majority of stuff empirically with good success. But when you look at something and you're like, I've got astigmatism that doesn't really match the cornea, right? Or I've got astigmatism with pretty significant elevation differences, that may be when you're starting to think, I need to go with a custom design here. I need to go with something I'm going to design on Wave, or something I'm going to design on Ortho Tools, or something I'm going to design on iSpace, right? I think that you want to be thinking about what's most efficient for you. And if you're going to commit to using software, I think you really need to commit to it. There's a steep learning curve with all of those software designs. And I think you need to be kind of thinking about that or aware of that when you take on those cases.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did.
I hope it did as well. I mean, I learn so much every time we talk. So I can't see why not. Speaking, here's a question. Have you heard of the board game Return to the Dark Tower?
Interestingly enough, I have not. I've seen the advertisements for it.
Mm-hmm. I backed it on Kickstarter because we used to play. I remember my dad brought home the original Dark Tower, and like my brothers and I absolutely loved this original board game. And they recently did like a reboot of it, and it has like this. The tower spins in different directions and drops skulls out of it, and it has all these like great pieces and sounds. And
I'm looking at it right now. I really like the graphics on it. I think they're beautiful.
Yeah, I'll bring it, assuming it ever shows up. I'll bring it to Next Vision by Design, and we'll play it.
I would love that.
I have another question if you're ready from the chat.
I was hoping it was board game related, but cool. We're cool. We're good. We could do a whole board game podcast.
I'm down for it for sure. Here's a question for you.
It all began when I was 9 years old. Sorry.
What is the highest RX you have ever treated?
I have done all the way up to, well, probably one of the most interesting cases I did. I'd started fitting. I couldn't have fit 10 or 12 cases. And I took on a -8, -3 axes 180 because I didn't know any better. And I fit that patient successfully. That patient still wears retainers. She is 66 years old now, if I'm not mistaken. I fit her like 18 or 19 years ago. And I spent more time with her in the first year than I did with my wife. Like I spent so much time with that woman because I just didn't know what the heck I was doing. I like tried fitting her. I had to go and get help. I did this particular fit was with Steve Ernst at Context. And I mean, I think I charged her $2,000, and I probably spent $1,500 just in materials alone. It was just the most hot mess. It was unique. Since then, though, I've done up to -10 successfully. The problem I run into when you're fitting those high myopia cases is those people can't ever miss a night. Right? So if you've got, like my son's a -3, and he's been doing, we call GBSS or Ortho K for, I don't know, he's 16 now. He's probably been doing it since he was 10, right? So he skips a night, he sees fine. 2 nights even, he's good. He's rock solid. 3 nights, he starts to fade. You get a patient who's a -8, -9, -10. They skip a night, they're blurry. So at least for me and my experience, you can do those cases, but those cases are just much, much more difficult. They're more complicated. Sometimes you even have to do them in stages. I've been known to correct a certain amount of that and then go in and correct a little bit more of it. So you don't want to bite off that whole -10, at least for me at the first night, right? So I might do a -6 or 7 of that. Then I might come in and tweak the rest of it later. So big cases you can do them, but their stability becomes to question. And then you also have to be aware that you also end up with small treatment zones. And so those patients can be really tricky.
Small treatment zones. Where do you fall in on that debate?
Oh, my Lord. That's a whole discussion unto itself. So if I'm doing myopia control, small treatment zones are fine. but I'm not sure if they're the be all end all that some people believe them to be. For me, here's the pupil, okay? I want my treatment zone to be right at the edge of that pupil, okay? So it's a little bit inside of that. If I end up with really tiny treatment zones, I usually end up with pretty unhappy folks. So for me, I'm more of I'm a smaller treatment zone, but I'm not going for extreme stuff, at least personally. And I've seen really good results on slowing down myopia with having treatment zones that were just at or inside the pupillary margin.
Gotcha. All right, you ready for one more question? Then we'll call it a day.
I'm going to be running out of time soon here, Matt. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't save some of this for the next time we get together. How are we doing, and how long should we stay doing this tonight?
I'll as long as you're up for it. I can do one more question if you can do one more question. Otherwise, we can call it here.
I think we do one more question.
Okay. All right. So when do you use aspheric design, and how often do you use it?
I use aspheric designs a fair amount of the time. And a lot depends on what I'm trying to achieve with the fit. We could almost spend a significant amount of time talking about aspheric designs, and I almost feel like we would need to have one of the really advanced fitters as a guest to really get into the nitty gritty of why aspheric and when aspheric. So I almost feel like that's a big one that deserves its own discussion. I can tell you that I've been able sometimes with aspheric designs to get almost a multifocal effect for some patients. But that's kind of a discussion unto itself as well. I think that's a complicated question, and I'm waffling on it, and I think only because it really leads to a big discussion. So maybe we should flag that as one of our topics.
Okay, you want to do that for next month?
Maybe not next month.
Okay.
I've got other things I think would be a little juicier, but maybe that's something where we could bring in a Ken Maller, or bring in a Steve Ernst, or a Mark Cosgrove, or a Wachowski, or someone who's like talented and excited about that, Yeah, I think that'd be fun. That'd be fun.
Definitely. Yeah, let's plan for that, because this is between two Matthews, and
I know,
we're going to be doing this every month, and it looks like we've had 4 viewers. I think if we plan these out in advance and let people know that they're happening, I
want to thank the viewers tonight. I am just really excited. I always enjoy my conversations with Matt Herzberg. But it's nice to know we're not just in a vacuum. So I'm super, super excited to have people here. And I feel like we need a little thing that comes up that says explicit content. Opinions are the opinions of the people talking, right? Like we need to have something that that warns folks. And we have to be a little careful. I don't want this stuff held against me when I get to Vision by Design. People be like, I heard what you said about the Pentacam, or like, I don't want Randy Kojima to be like, what do you mean you don't want to follow me on stage?
I mean, to be fair, like Randy Kojima, as many other speakers, are like picture like a stand-up comedian, and then you have this like legend. And it's like, you are this accomplished, experienced, like Matthew Martin is a great speaker. He's very knowledgeable. He's very personable. He draws crowds. And then, but you also have this established legend in this business. Like Randy Kojima is the guy for topography, right? Yeah. And it's like, that's called a death sentence in stand-up comedy when you have to follow and act like that.
You'd be like going on after Robin Williams. It's just not never a good thing. Did I tell you my Randy Kojima story? I think I've told everybody this, but if I told you the story,
tell it.
Oh my gosh. All right. Here's hoping Randy's not listening, but maybe he is. I think it's funny. So I was at GSLS one of the years, and I got to go before Randy, which was very exciting for me. So I might have been on there with Carolyn Kauke, who the Lion, there's a woman who is amazing. That woman is phenomenal. You talk about a powerhouse in ortho-K and myopia control. But anyways, I'm on stage with the Lion, and we're doing our thing, and her and I have a pretty good interaction most of the time. We didn't do as well on the virtual boot camp as we do in person, because I think we're better on stage with playing off each other, But we were on stage. Randy sat in the audience listening to us talk. And then I came off the stage and he went on the stage. And I ran into him at the casino, which is where that event happens in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into him at the casino at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he said to me, do you know why people like listening to you on stage? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, because I think they look at you on stage and they think, if that guy can do it, anyone can do it. And I was like, oh, that was just like the cruelest and most awesome compliment I ever received. Because if you think about it, that's when I lecture, that's what I would like to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
I would like people to think, if Matthew Martin can do it,
mm-hmm.
I can do it. And
mm-hmm.
honestly, I mean, it was crushing, it was soul crushing, but it was also a really fantastic compliment to my stage presence, if you will.
Yeah. And it's, forgive me if anybody's heard this before, because we're going to put this in a podcast and on the YouTube channel, but like, to me, that's a great compliment because it means you have connective tissue to the audience. And I'll give you an example is I had a friend who was, who still is like, into weightlifting, physical fitness. And it's because he hurt his back when he was in his youth. And his doctors told him like, you're going to suffer from this back problem for the rest of your life in this way. And he started working out and conditioning. And he has this like, superhero like body, right? So when he goes to the gym and he works out, people walk up to him and they ask him questions and he answers them and they give him this response of like, well, that's easy for you to say, look at you, like he'll say something like, look, just stick with it, try, see what works. You can follow this plan, try, keep at it, keep a positive attitude. And they look at him and they're like, well, look at you. That's easy for you to say. And he says that like, there's this barrier, this distance, like he's too far ahead for them to realize that he was in their shoes, a long time ago, but he was in their shoes and he just stuck with it and found his way. And I think like Randy is such this legend and big presence that I think a lot of people might look at a speaker of that caliber in that kind of capacity where when they have Matthew Martin in front of them, you're relatable, you're personable, not to say that Randy isn't, but that's why I would take that as a compliment is you have connective tissue to your audience where they say, okay, yeah, like this makes sense to me. This person, I could be someone doing this at that level. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, at the time, it took me the next day before I was like, okay, all right, you meant it as a compliment,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fantastic. But at the time I was like, ouch, ow. Ooh. But, I mean, that's part of it. Part of what makes, again, I hate to wax poetic about the specialty, but that's what makes the specialty truly unique
Mm-hmm.
is because anybody who puts the time and effort into it can end up being very successful in changing people's lives.
Right. All right.
It looks like I'm losing you.
You're losing me?
I am, but
no. Is that what
you've got a little bit of max headroom going there?
Oh no. Okay. Well, then we should just end here. And I'll say like, look, right. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, Matthew, how should they do so?
Yeah, they can reach out to me at auburnoptical@gmail.com. Let's say that there's somebody out there right now who wants to get hooked up with a lab or wants to get the inside scoop on something. Just reach out to me at auburnoptical@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, Auburn Optical. We should talk about the building that I just bought too, because I'm going to be moving my practice. So that's going to be an adventure I'm going on in the next couple of years. So that'll be exciting. If anyone enjoys the things we're doing or has any input, reach out to me, let me know your thoughts. I'm excited and interested. So
definitely. And I'd like to remind anyone listening or watching that, if this is content that you're enjoying, it's because of the dues paying members of the AAOMC, like Matthew Martin. He's not getting paid to do this. He's coming on and talking with me because he wants to, because we have great conversations and we were both like, we should be recording these. So between two Matthews is a thing that is going to be a regular monthly thing because like we love doing it, but also, our dues paying members of the AAOMC give us their actual real life money to make content like this happen. They empower me to make this possible and for Matthew to be a part of this exchange of giving back. So if you're interested in seeing more content like this, consider becoming a member at aaomc.org. All right, Matthew, anything you want to say before we head out? I'm going to end this Facebook live stream in just a second.
No, I really enjoyed this evening. Let's come up with I've got a bunch of topics. We'll talk about a bunch of fun stuff and we'll toss some board game stuff in there. We'll talk about my new building. We'll have a good time. It'll be good.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, let's organize our December one and I'll make an actual event for it in Facebook so more people can attend.
And I'm always coming across stuff at work that I'm excited about or interested in, or, we'll talk about real life cases or things that happen where you're like, what? Why did what? You know what I mean? How to deal with tricky patients, how to keep the ball rolling, trying to manage ordering and processing and dispensing and, all the things that go along with that. What hydrogen peroxide's best? What's worst?
Yeah. What I would love to
purchase.
What I would love to do while we're on the topic is we did for boot camp, and we're going to be making this available to our dues paying members as part of our video library. But we did a webinar for boot camp where it was like an AAOMC grand rounds. And I want to do these on the regular starting next year, where there's 3 presenters and a host, and each presenter presents like an interesting Ortho K case, not unlike what they do for fellowship, right? Something where they showed some critical thinking or some troubleshooting or whatever the case may be. And I'd love to get the Mission Myopia Management guys on for an episode, you and Garowitz and Washevsky, the 3 of you, on to do a case report episode for the AAOMC. What do you think? That'd be great. Like, you guys have such a wealth of knowledge between you. That would be awesome.
I could float it and see what they have to say. It could be very entertaining. Those are three strong personalities. Just like getting 3 strong flavors at once. I don't know.
Yeah, I think people would love to see that. Yeah.
My daughter just turned 21, and we've got her some instant hand soaps for because she likes those little instant hand soaps that come in the different smells or whatever. And there was one that was blackberry basil. That's it sounds horrifying, doesn't it? Doesn't it just sound awful? Aren't you like, why would you want to rub blackberry basil on your hands? It smelled wonderful. Kind of blew me out of my shoes. So maybe we could put those 3 minds together and come up with something that's not too funky.
I'd love it. We could have Jonathan Stoner be, I think he's volunteered to be the host or moderator of it. So each one of you presents a case, and then for 15 minutes or so, 10-15 minutes, and then 5 minutes afterwards, everybody just discusses it. And we'll just press record and let you guys go to work. It'd be great. I'd love it. What is it like being a father with a 21-year-old daughter? I don't have kids.
Dude, it's I am so blessed. Having kids is the best thing I ever did. That's a whole discussion into itself too, And my son, who's 16, is my afternoon co-op now. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, wow, cool. Nice.
Yeah, he's my afternoon co-op. We had some difficulties getting someone who wanted to do the work because it's hard work. But I'm loving it. And for my son, who had no interest in eye care, he's now flirting with the idea of possibly being an eye doctor, which is super exciting. So
that's awesome.
It's weird. Watching your kids get old is a whole thing. We could talk for days, but I got to go home and eat dinner. So
yeah, I should let you go. I'm sorry to keep you so long. Yeah, but this is what happens when we
might have created a monster. Did we create a monster doing this? Was this a bad idea?
And the monster needs to come back next month and the month afterwards and so on.
Like, what were we thinking, dude? I mean,